Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission meeting, recorded April 10, 2024.
I'll call this meeting of the Stevens Point Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission to order. Can you please call the roll?
O'Mara?
Here.
Fisher?
Here.
Plaisance?
Here.
Cole is excused. Peterson?
Here.
And Leviton?
Here.
Say that right?
You said it right.
Perfect.
Good work.
All right, 5-0, and we have a quorum.
Report of the December 20th, 2023 meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission. Have you had a chance to look it over?
Yeah.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll approve.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Consideration of a resolution aspiring to eliminate roadway deaths and serious injuries. Adam, you want to explain what we're...
Yeah, so as folks recall, the city, along with Portage County and the villages of Plover, Whiting, and Park Ridge, were awarded a planning and demonstration grant through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. That's a grant program administered by the U.S. Department of Transportation. So we were awarded that grant back in December 2023 with the intent that's shown on the screen to create an action plan, update the 2014 countywide bike ped plan, and then perform a variety of different demonstration activities to support the creation of those two plans that I just mentioned, the action plan and updating the bike ped plan. As part of the grant administration process, obviously there's a slew of different things that would have to be undertaken now and over the course of the next 2.5 years as we progress through this project. One of these is that there has to be a leadership commitment by the governing bodies of the aforementioned municipalities, essentially saying that they aspire to an eventual goal of zero roadway deaths and serious injuries on their roadways. Within the grant criteria, that commitment resolution would have to include either one, a target date of achieving that zero number, and or specific percentage reductions with an eventual date of zero deaths and injuries. So that information with the eventual date is included within the resolution. The one thing I'll just note is that we're not bound to achieving this goal as a condition of receiving grant funds vis-a-vis if we don't eliminate roadway deaths and serious injuries by, I believe the year was 2045, I could be wrong. It doesn't mean that we have to return the money back to the US DOT. Really, this is showing that the governing bodies of the recipients of this grant are really speaking truth to power in terms of the intention behind this grant and what we as a governing body will be undertaking over the next 2 years. So the resolution is included within the agenda packet that's being kicked over as we speak to the other municipalities. Really starting with you folks. Next up would be Village of Park Ridge this upcoming Monday. So if there's any comments or questions, happy to take it. Otherwise, any action, if there is action taken tonight, that would be a recommendation brought before the Board of Public Works in April, and then the in May, and then the Common Council in May as well. So any questions, happy to take it.
What is the timeline for updating the bike ped plan from 2014? I spent a couple of evenings going through it, and it's first of all, it's a wonderful document, great goals, very comprehensive.
I hope you didn't read the whole thing, because that would take you forever.
No, I skimmed it. But it's a great document, but to update it with all of the goals and to see how we did over the last 10 years, I mean, that's a big effort, and I'm just wondering if there's a timeline for that.
And I'll speak a little bit more about timeline during the staff update, but to answer your question directly, I believe within the grant agreement that we have with the USDOT, the estimated time of completion would be mid-year 2026. So that would be when the planning document is updated and approved by the governing bodies. So hopeful, obviously.
Yep.
There'll probably be some wrenches thrown in there throughout the next 2.5 years, but that's the intent.
Yeah, and from what I gathered, there were a lot of people that worked on that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Public Works and the City Council approval of the multi-jurisdictional commitment to eliminate roadway fatalities resolution.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. And now we're going to have a presentation by the Director of Public Works on what we're going to try to accomplish in.
And I'll just give a quick background as Scott's passing it around. So there were some internal discussions that we had in terms of when's the appropriate ways of bringing this commission into the fold for street reconstruction projects. So what we're looking to do is kind of tweak the timeline, so to speak, from what we've done in the past, where now is generally the time, and obviously Scott will speak more on that, now is generally the time that Scott and his department focuses on street projects for the following year. So we think that now is a good time to try to get some perspectives from this commission as to overarching priorities from a bike ped safety matter. So Scott can use that information, work with his team, Board of Public Works, into the design phase. So Scott's here to give a presentation about those street improvement projects.
Presentation makes me sound like I should have something up on the screens, but
This is official, man.
You got
I
this.
thought maybe more of an, trying to keep it more informal discussion on what it is, because I think that's really what's necessary at that. So, but I do have, as I handed out here, just kind of, what we're proposing for 2025. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about kind of the history, like where we are today, where at least we're looking to go as far as public works. And I think hopefully by the end of that, you'll kind of see why that all matters to this commission. And then we can start to, formulate, beyond tonight, how that might play in this commission's role within that. So, see, starting with a little bit of history, actually, is because of otherwise how budgets are otherwise set, and all of our projects are based upon our capital budget approval. That typically starts sometime in June, isn't approved until the fall. So even what I presented to you today is just kind of my thoughts and my staff as we collect these things and come together. What actually we will do next year will be decided based upon the funding that we're given through the capital budgeting process. That's truly what governs what we're able to accomplish in any given year. Historically, what has happened, and part of the reason that's made this otherwise a challenge to get done as far as the overreaching as far as public involvement, as far as this commission and stuff, is the tie between capital projects and the evaluation stuff. We can do more stuff in some sort of official / unofficial capacity to try to gather public and comments and incorporate that. Oftentimes, though, the efforts towards these are generally directly linked to that capital improvement. Therefore, until the capital budget is approved, we typically haven't really done anything. I run a spreadsheet, kind of come up with this, calculate that, and get there. And it's once the capital budget is approved, we're given the green light to start, which typically then is around, like, call it October 1st. You can already probably identify that creates a challenge in public works to try to bid in the spring when we're starting in, the fall, try to get that done, and then try to incorporate more public involvement within it, which we always try to do, but it kind of limits to what we otherwise, have. We've debated a few things, and how to try to improve upon that. Also, just kind of highlight a little bit more, is like what you see on these 3 pages that I have here is considerably more than was done before I started here. And I'm not saying that that's my fault. They had already formulated some things and recognized the need to improve. That's not because of me. That was set in motion or that, but it just happened to correspond in the same time frame to do that. So considerably more, projects started to grow. The council had already made a commitment to increase the capital funding towards these projects. Prior to, and even including in 2017 when I started, The project for 2017, as I recall, was Prentice Street was already underway, so that was Maria Drive down to, I even forget how far south it went. Was it Briggs Street? I can tell you exactly what it is, maybe 3/4 of a mile or something. 2018 project was Isidore Street, which was Maria to Portage. You know, that was our total road work for those 2 years. And it was only kind of after that we started adding more, recognizing that we needed to do more if we were ever going to keep up with it. You know, roads were deteriorating faster than we were investing back into them. So I was picking up on that. So we have that commitment, but it still became this challenge as we were trying to increase what we were trying to accomplish in any given year. You know, now we're trying to otherwise get more, and we still have the same basic time frame to do it. October to trying to bid it as early as we can in the year to get the best prices. So we've started utilizing some of the outside firms to get it. So we have consultants to help us with, and we're trying to, you know, get away with that, do more, you know, internal. So that all kind of played a role in how do we get the public involved. You know, like if we get them involved too early, then my fear was always just that none of that's going to be considered. You know, you got a consultant. What are you going to do? You're going to tell them, like, maybe watch this video, see what people said. You know, look at these comments, see what it is. You know, I think oftentimes, you know, being, you know, an engineer myself and being through that process, if you're not fully engaged, you're not engaged at all, nearly to say. And that may be an overstatement in that, but you know, if you don't really buy into it and do it, and someone's just giving you information, say, hey, this is what the public has kind of commented, you know, on this, it doesn't necessarily hit the mark. And that's just unfortunate. I think that's human nature. So we've been trying to do that. So what we've done the last couple of years, which has worked much better, is working with utilities. Many of these projects now are just and I should even step back, maybe I should have started with that, is, you know, 2 major type projects. One, we have a street, you know, resurfacing project, which is really just repaving, you know, the road. We're not necessarily altering anything there, so there's maybe limited to what changes we might otherwise make, but it's truly just kind of the pavement. And then we have our reconstruct project, which is really where we, you know, from right-of-way line to right-of-way line, we, you know, it's a, you know, kind of just blow it all up and start all over again. So it gives us more freedom to do that. You know, the canvas is now cleared of everything, and now if we wanted to incorporate changes to it, you know, pedestrian improvements, bicycle improvements, you know, however we're going to change it, we have that flexibility. When we do that, that also includes, you know, a replacement of the utilities beneath it in those reconstruct projects. So if you're working with utilities, well, the nice thing about utilities and this increase in what we're doing is that utilities isn't held to the same budgeting constraints that we are as a city. So what we've been doing, don't tell Corey this, that's the comptroller treasurer, don't tell, hopefully he's not watching, he won't watch this. Sway him to that is that do that, but he's aware of it, actually. So what we've other started to do, because they don't have that, so we're trying to start earlier using them as the lead. So there's kind of a risk, we've kind of accepted that as, you know, what will be budgeted for the year, but we work through them to do the contracting for those consultants, so we're starting earlier. And that has started with that. We have found a few issues because as we, you know, depending upon when we start, you know, a number of our staff that provide great value to a good finished product, the ones on the street, you know, they might be out inspecting and stuff. They don't have a lot of time in the summer to comment like we want them to, but we're still refining it to get there, but it's definitely working better, and we're getting earlier. Again, the projects were smaller when I started. Like the idea of a public involvement meeting, you know, was kind of like, yeah, we have to have one. Okay, you know, since I've otherwise continued, you know, kind of basically said we're going to have a minimum of 2 for every project. Doesn't matter, you know, we need to have one early, because if we don't start early enough, we don't get the you know, we can't be at 80% completed and say, oh, let's just let the public know what we're doing and think that, you know, we get comments back like, what are we going to change? It's like we can't proceed with that. And to some extent, we were kind of trapped in that because of the time commitment. You know, we had just months to get everything done, so it was difficult to do a whole lot. So we've, you know, increased that, and so now we're otherwise much. I think we've improved considerably at that. Now that we're otherwise trying to get, you know, we've got staff, we've got a new, you know, city engineer back on staff to do that. We're looking to make some other changes in engineering to get ahead of that. So a little glimpse to what the future, at least I hope, will happen. I still need to get a little bit of concurrence from personnel committee on some reorganization I'm trying to accomplish. And then, of course, from the common council to do that is to try to get ahead of the game. And this is going to give us the greatest flexibility to what we otherwise have. And so we're still working kind of with this current model of the utilities kind of taking the lead and getting this contracting to get consultants earlier. You know, my goal is to kind of work through, hopefully this year, to get this. We'll still be hiring consultants to do some of the work this year. I'm hoping that that's going to free up staff to actually start working, which I don't have in here. Still got others formulate that and refine it a little bit to start working on 26. My goal is before the end of this year, we're actually working on 26 projects. And if we're going to do that, it says one of the things I want to do is kick those projects off, you know, doing it more internally, is kick that off with that public involvement meeting. You know, let's get out there and get there, and let's get that. Let's get this commission involved in that. You know, like, you know, let's see what it is, because that's going to give us the greatest flexibility to incorporate people's comments into that and listen to what the public has to say to get it, you know, actually into the project. You know, like I said, I'm an engineer. I like to think I have all the answers. Mr. O'Meara, you're an engineer too. It's like, but we realize that we don't have all the answers, and sometimes the public has some really good ideas. And it's, you know, you don't want to get to the end of the project and say, didn't think of that. And you're looking at it like, well, we can either bid this project or take our chances with it, you know, depending upon how much change it is. So hopefully that's not, you know, too much otherwise in history, but that's kind of where we're at. And I think that's why it's important to see what it is like. Hopefully everyone understands like where it is and where this commission is, and what my goal is to try to involve this commission, you know, Board of Public Works, the public more into what we're doing and get them, you know, involved in these things. And then that's really what we need, because that's when we're going to find, you know, ultimately we're going to get to that point in time. Hopefully we're going to get that, call it satisfaction from people. You know, to simply just put something out and let the public comment on it at the end of the project is one thing, but to truly try to get some ideas involved like that. Not to say we're going to incorporate everything everybody says, but just that opportunity that we can hear what people's concerns are, and what do they, and then we can try to address them. You know, I still like to reserve, you know, engineering still reserves within public works. We'll get that done. But sometimes we don't see things the same way people that interact with those corridors every day. Is, you know, like even this very first one, you know, Washington Avenue is the first page like that. I don't remember the last time I drove down Washington Avenue, but if you live there or, you know, nearby there, it says you probably interacted with it every day. And if you're, you know, if you have school-age children and they walk to, say, you know, the Pacelli Middle School, your perception of that corridor is probably different than mine. You're interacting with it every day. You've got feedback. That's really what we otherwise want to get, and what we've in part been missing in the past, you know, to get there and, you know, do that. So what I'm hoping we're going to happen is that I know we've, you know, and this commission has otherwise had, you know, walking audits before to do that. You know, and I'd still like to otherwise, you know, do that. I mean, hopefully everyone understands, you know, when it comes to some of the sidewalk stuff, you know, we're going to meet all the ADA requirements. We're going to try to do that. But hopefully we can find some other things to do that we can at least get the feedback. And that's what's going to help guide us in the engineering role to try to come up with the plan, the design that hopefully works best. We want to hear from people. Like I said, again, it doesn't mean that anybody that has an idea is going to get what they want, but hopefully collectively we can look at that and see what the public's concerns about on any corridor and try to, you know, come up with a solution to that works best. So that's covered with that. And with that, then I can kind of go now to, unless there's any questions, kind of history to present and kind of what it is. I'll actually get into maybe the more what everyone thought it would be, you know, and talk about these sheets in front of you. So we actually have 3 potential projects identified for 2025. The first one on the sheet here, which is the Washington Avenue one, this is what we've identified as our full reconstruction project for the year. We've been, you know, trying to, in kind of like an almost every other year basis, try to get back to the north side. It has some of the oldest infrastructure, especially buried infrastructure in the city, so trying to address, you know, those issues. We're still trying to identify exactly the project limits, but this is essentially what we've, you know, come up with and we're working towards. Now, in this particular case, we actually had an opportunity with one of our techs to get started that. So we've got someone actually working on some design issues right now to try to get a little bit ahead, at least of some of it, and try to come up with some of the ideas. But, you know, this actually would be a really good project, I think, at this point in time. If the commission so interested to do that, as far as walking on it, would be a good opportunity. I'm hoping that as we get just into the early part of the summer, you know, we're having that first PIM. Yes, sir.
You know what would really help us out? I'm thinking of Washington, and, you know, we have a lot of stuff going on in the park. If we would have you guys look over crash data and see if there are any trouble areas on any of these. I was looking at this one in Michigan where the two, I thought it may exist, I don't know.
Right.
But that would be helpful for us to say, yeah, maybe we need something a little more extraordinary for a crossing, for instance, or maybe we want to daylight something. And before we do our walk.
Sure, absolutely, yeah, and that's definitely something that I can otherwise look into and provide. I don't know if there's just any question. I know it's the first time you've seen it, but that's, kind of that. Like I said, that's our full reconstruct. That's the one that kind of, like I said, we're going to tear out everything and put it back in. Just to, essentially, it's a local road. However, since there is a school on it, I think there are people that, kind of approach towards the, Piffner and Buchholz parks. This way, though, most of the traffic tends to favor 4th Avenue. But there's definitely an opportunity for, for comment on that. The second one is actually something that's been sitting around. We actually proposed this as part of an LRIP, which is a local roads improvement program, a few years ago as just a resurfacing project. But the utilities then identified a few issues that they had. So we reconsidered it. That after they evaluated it more, we decided that this, once again, instead of being just a resurfacing project, would be a full reconstruction project. They felt it necessary to get in there. So once again, we have an opportunity, to see what we want to do that. One thing that I otherwise note, particularly with this one, that I would be very interested in what the general public and this commission would have to say is that if you've been keeping up on Business 51, what we're otherwise proposing to do is bring an urban shoulder up there, because it fits within the right-of-way, up to around this, Monroe Street area, at which point in time, we no longer have the right-of-way space to continue that north. So no bike lane, no bicycle facilities to do there. It would be nice to do that, and as far as I know, Adam, I think you and I probably talked about this a long time ago, at least in passing, regarding, what does it look like? We have some bicycle routes in there. It says, but how do we really do that? How do we deal with that? What is that transition to? How do we do that? Even if it's kind of in the educational realm of getting at that, we're going to have an urban shoulder up here, and then what do we do? People are going to have to take these side streets to do that, which is going to include part of, this. If it comes up to Monroe, we need to be aware of the fact that in the future, not too many years out, I would hope that people would take advantage of an urban shoulder, even on Business 51, and utilize that, and we could see the benefits of that. But we can't forget that all of a sudden it drops off here. What do we do? So I think that would otherwise be one thing, is to try to figure out that. Is there anything specific we need to consider? Are there concerns about it that we need to address before we get into that? I will caveat, this particular project may not happen exactly to the extent it is, and I will flip the page then to the last one we have on here, which is Michigan Avenue. And the reason otherwise being is that if you've otherwise driven under this recently, you've noticed the past couple of winters have been a little rough on it. This winter was actually very gentle to the underpass. We are experiencing some issues with the underdrain system there because it does go underneath the railroad tracks. There's a continuous drain system there. There's perforated pipe that drains the groundwater out of there to keep it dry. If it otherwise stopped running, there's a pump station on the northwest portion of just beyond the bridge there, if you've otherwise recognized that. If that stops working, pretty much the road is underwater. So we need to others keep that working. We have been having a few issues, and those issues have, while the water necessarily hasn't surfaced there, what we otherwise have is seen due to some of the failures of the underdrain system is some heaving. The soil around there beneath that, the pavement is becoming increasingly more saturated and freeze thaw, and we're starting to bust up the concrete there, and that's what's really causing the issue that's happening. So we need to address this, and one of the reasons I prioritize this one is as we start to reconstruct Business 51, we know that we're going to see more traffic on Michigan Avenue as a potential detour route around that, depending upon which phase of work we're in. I really want to try to accomplish this in this one, because the one thing that I don't think as a city we want to otherwise experience is the fact that, we've closed this because the pavement is busted up or it's flooding, and we don't necessarily have an option now. What do we do? So I highly, this is my priority for 2025 to get done, because it's not necessarily the pavement, it's the underdrain system, to make sure that for the next few years as we're building building 51. I say 151. I grew up in Columbus, Wisconsin. That was 151 there. Don't know why I stretched back to that. That's old age is what, to get there. But yet at the same time, because it's the under drain system, if you've been here, the pavement here is very, very wide. And I know Neil Prendergast has already reached out to me and just said, hey, Scott, I see this as a potential project. That says, I've got some ideas. And I know if he's got ideas, and I always like Neil's ideas and stuff like that, others have there. I think there's a lot of potential to change what we see there today to something that's, better, multimodal for everybody. So definitely encourage everything, and this is something I'd really want to get to. We will be using a consultant on this project. I told them, I says, expect at least a minimum of 3 PMs, because I think we need to start early and collect ideas, because there's a lot of potential for what we could do for this corridor. There's not many places you can cross from here. We need to make sure that it works for everybody to get across there. But depending upon what we come out with for this, and the cost of that, as we get in the budgeting, may impact that. And where I'm probably going to take from is that Madison, Monroe project. Scale that one back to make sure that we get there, depending upon what the council will allow. As far as total budgeting for the year. My guess is right now, originally I was just looking to work under the underpass here. Utilities had some issues, and I think just there's also the kind of a practical thing to kind of get there. I think going intersection to intersection from Patch to Dixon makes some sense. I've also asked the Strand as the consultant we plan on using for this project to evaluate the intersections. They're pretty big and open at the moment, and your concern is just you tell us, in part, engineering perspective, kind of what is, Patch is not a very pedestrian-friendly intersection. If anyone's otherwise tried to walk through there at Morton Park, it really isn't. So I said, let's take a look at this and, kind of let's see if we need to do that. I don't know if we have the budget. My earlier budget estimates for this were really just, I said, working on the underdrain system and the pavement. So it kind of expands it. So I don't really know what it is. We'll be working through the spring and summer to get there and see, what this might come out to be. But I think it's important that before we even get the budgeting, that we get some public comment, see what it is. Because beyond that, we're just guessing. And I'd really like to see, what do people see this corridor looking like? In addition to just, I said, it's such a major component of getting, past the railroad tracks. It's important. So between this commission and the public, see what it is. As well as, maybe what those intersections, should look like. What would improve them? How would people feel safer? What would we change to make people more inclined to use that? Would you, I can't say, I know no one's already talked to me, but from my own perspective, of course, I live south of, are you driving your kids because you don't let them, even if you live closely, maybe you live on Laura, and do you drive your kids to Morton Park to play baseball if they're part of a sports team because you don't want them to cross that corridor? I want to hear from those people. To see what it is, what would make it inviting that you would say that you'd let your, Little League age child, walk there, because that's ultimately where we need to be. That intersection is so set up for vehicular traffic, it seems to have forgotten everybody else. So those are the 3 projects. A little bit of narrative and opinion and comments on my part related to that. I don't know if anyone has kind of just questions. I said nothing is otherwise settled, and unfortunately nothing does get settled until capital dollars and we figured out what we can afford to do. But working with this is we do plan on getting started even ahead of that, like I said, kind of at risk with the utilities on this one and the Madison Road, at least to get them designed. Ultimately we may not bid the Monroe Madison one, but my intent would be to still get it designed this year, even if it becomes a future project. So we'd definitely be looking for comments related to that. So, which is not uncommon for me. I've taken up a lot more of your time than I always thought that. I don't know why. Once I get in front of a microphone, it seems like I can talk on.
You did great.
I'm a real quiet guy. Otherwise, I have really nothing to say any other time. But
can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
Just quick chime in. Trevor, I see your hand up. I'm just going to have the commissioners ask questions first, and then once those questions are exhausted, I'll entertain your question.
Okay, that's an interesting intersection, especially going northbound in your car. Mm-hmm. And because of the turn lanes, you have to get to the right turn lane, and they're big bicycle lanes, and I use bike and car getting through there. And if there's going to be a ton more traffic with the road construction of Business 51, are you thinking of reconfiguring the turn lanes, or just
what I've otherwise told Strand so far is they're trying to put together a proposal for it, and so we don't have anyone on a contract. That is, as far as like an evaluation on their part, as far as the engineering, I said there's, nothing is off the table. Because I think we have to start there. I don't want to try to say like, no, keep it there. It talked about what it is. It says we need to know first off, and that's always been my approach to engineering. You don't want to consider, first I want to know is like, what is the absolute best thing in any situation to do that? maybe they'll come up with something that we can't afford to do. But we need to know that if we're going to make good decisions really to do that. It's just we need to always think of that, all right, it's not attainable. And then we can start to peel back and see what it is. And then we can start to look at how it is. Think, what are we giving up for what we can afford to get? And that's where we can otherwise make decisions, beyond that. If I tell them, it says, well, just try to see if we can do that. Maybe we can adjust some lanes or, the offset with that. I don't want to try to lead them that because that's not what I think we should do. As an engineer, sometimes, we can be pigeonholed into that. And rightfully so. I mean, stereotyped into that. We're kind of a certain type of personality that seems to excel in that industry. But, give them an opportunity to it. And it's always, amazing me what they can come up with, to do that. And especially if we can get more comment. The more we can lay out concerns with that and try to address those, and the more data points you have to work with and things you're trying to fit in, I think every engineer likes the challenge to try to do that. Like, oh gosh, people say the traffic is bad because of this, and like, oh, if I'm riding my bike, it says this is the challenges I have. If I'm walking across it, this is the challenge, and try to put it together. It's like, I don't know that it otherwise worked, that, but it's like, I know the individual that was out there representing Strand, our client manager that, and he actually looked at me and he said, and so just roundabout, like, nothing's off the table. He says, I want to know what the right thing to do is. He says, I don't know how that would fit. I'm not the design expert on that. If that's it, because, that can not always, not everyone likes those. I'm like, no, I want to know what the right thing to do is. Do the evaluation, find out what it is, let us know what your honest opinion is to what it is, and we'll make a decision. Because without having that information, I don't want to lead you to say, do that, because I know we just recently did a timing study at Dixon coming southbound, and if you've otherwise been through there, you notice that there's no longer a left turn green arrow. So we've gotten rid of. There aren't enough turns to that. Do I say try to evaluate how we can eliminate that turn lane and narrow the line? That may not be the right solution. Like I said, I want them to tell us what it is through a full evaluation of what it is and understanding of what concerns that this commission and the public otherwise has with going through there in any mode of transportation. So, long answer again. I got a microphone in front of me. I just love to tell it.
Thank you.
I have I think a quick question. Are we deciding which one we're doing a walk audit on?
I was going to touch on that at the end. So
Okay.
yeah, put a pin on that.
Okay.
Any other questions as far as? All right.
And I'll add too before Trevor, is that obviously Scott knows this very well, is that planned and future development is always an indicator, is always taken into account for street projects as well. And I think one of the things that's really important to note, specific for the second page, the Madison and Monroe corridors, is that you have the old Altenburg Dairy building, the adaptive reuse project that's underway, that what the planned traffic count is for that building is important and would be factored into the overall design of these two corridors. I just wanted to make that note that there's a lot of variables that Scott can attest to better than I can. There's a lot of variables involved in terms of what's factored into how a street is designed, and that's one of many. So, Trevor, know your hand's up if you want to ask a question or comment.
Thanks, Adam. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right. So Trevor Rourke, 601 Washington Avenue. And so, yes, I'm one of those residents, Scott.
You are, yeah.
You knew that. You knew that going in. Yeah, so two things. One is first regarding Washington Avenue. I'm wondering, not necessarily before the walk roll audit, if Public Works can do a parking inventory on the street. The street currently is built for two sides of parking, so two parking lanes, and so it's kind of extra wide. Those parking spots fill up for 3 days of the year. Riverfront rendezvous. And that's it. And the rest of the year, they are just about empty. I think there's probably, on average, 3 cars per block or something like that. So I'm wondering if that's a possibility to do a parking inventory on that street as part of the project. And then The second thing is regarding the Michigan Avenue patch. You mentioned roundabout. I know we have this summer's first mini roundabout at 2nd and Maria going in. I'm wondering if that's a possibility, because if I'm thinking correctly, I think the intersection at Patch is actually larger than 2nd Ave and Maria. So I guess kind of two questions for you there.
Sure. And thank you for those. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely look at some of the parking and see how it works. Like most of our projects, when we otherwise take a look at that, pavement tends to narrow in most cases, because it's just, we don't need full parking lanes, full vehicular travel lanes, so that just tends to increase speed and decrease safety for everyone else on the road. So we can definitely take a look at that as we go through. As far as, yes, yeah, I don't really know what to work out. I think that's one of the things, even in my own mind, since it was, brought up, is the fact that both, Dixon and Michigan and Patch, they're very large. In fact, at Patch, the city, it controls 3, corners of that, beyond, the curb and sidewalk that exists there. So it's, there's potential for more. What I don't really know, because I'm not the designer in that, is, whether the vertical works there, because coming up underneath that, I don't know if you have the visual can work it out. So, maybe like a roundabout just physically doesn't work in the engineering respect, of that. So, I mean, that will have to be, evaluated. But yeah, clearly in some capacity between mini and full roundabout, I'd like to think that there's enough real estate there to accomplish something. But we do need to look at the other aspects of engineering before making any decisions on what they might be.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Any other questions for?
I guess I just want to make a comment that I agree that I always say you don't know what you don't know. So you can be an expert, but unless, like Trevor, it would be called a stakeholder, right? By living on Washington, like he's going to know a lot more than you do, despite your education or the designer's education. So I think it's really important to get people on it right away instead of just informing what's happening to them.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And it's always amazes me when we have, these things. The one that always sticks in mind is the Southside resurfacing project from last year. It's like, I forget how many we sent out. There were like 300 or so letters sent out for that. I mean, the impact there with all the apartments and stuff. This would be Indiana Bush, and Frontenac, Submarine stuff on the south side. That typically we only get, when we even try to reach out for people, about, at best, I mean, a good turnout for any of those is about 10%. And I think on that project it was far less, because we thought we needed a large venue. So we had Ben Franklin, we got the auditorium, got it set up, so thinking, this is big people. We figured, we could have upwards, you figure a couple people per household, and, a lot of the apartment buildings, because, we didn't send out one each individual apartment, but just send out the post at the apartment. So we figured, we need to have space. There were like 30 people there. It's just, and that's the thing we have to do. It's always a struggle to try to get people necessarily, involved, and that's, I also think starting early and trying to get it out, and I know we're trying to take a different approach to even writing those, letters. It seems sometimes it creates a little bit of anxiety and angst with people, and maybe even anger towards it, but, try to identify, like if we have some ideas more, try to get there. Like the second Maria one, the one thing we sent out the invitations that, but we had nothing settled in that. And then as we started to get into it, and the consultant was recommending, mini roundabout and like that, well, you really find out that if you put that in a letter, people respond more than if you just say there's improvements otherwise going on to get there, because, and it's both sides of the thing. Some people see that, really, we could do this, and they show up very supportive, and other people are like, wait, you're changing my intersection? No, but we need to listen to both sides and figure out where everyone is. And it's that, and so I'm still even working on trying to figure out, like, how do I write all these, invitations to try to, what are the trigger words to get people, involved? And that's where I'm one thing, if I could ask the commission, I'm like, help us promote these things and get people, there to be a part of it, because, that's where real things happen. I mean, and people sometimes think that, yeah, we're just telling them this is what we're doing, have a good night. when we get later, like that last one is oftentimes in much that case. You know, we're trying to share what we've come up with. It's like, we've done the engineering, we've done it. We just want to get it out there before it gets out on the street and we start construction. If that's the first time you show up, you probably do walk away with things, well, what use was it for me to be there? And that's why I keep trying to get these things started earlier and earlier to get out there, because that's when we can make changes. We listen to what people, and then try to work towards solutions that try to address the majority of what people otherwise are telling us and what we're hearing. But we still need to encourage more people to come out to do that and participate. All right, I've taken enough of your time. I mean, no one wants to listen to me talking.
One last question before I unpin that comment before. I guess, Scott, based off of, I guess, two factors. One, the level of, I guess, feedback that could be waged from this commission, and then two, the likelihood of the three areas that will be reconstructed in 2025. If you could rank, or at least give priority as to what would be the one, 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the corridors.
Right, and it would be like I said, for the reason I said before, as far as looking at future, detour traffic and stuff like that, Michigan Avenue just needs to be addressed. This is, we can't have a full failure of that under drain system, keep that working. So that's number one. But what we still need to do is define exactly what that project, works like. Because honestly, we could pin it down to the minimal amount and just work on the under drain system and that part of what it is. Do that. The second one would be Washington Avenue. That's something that the utilities especially has identified. That's some of the oldest infrastructure they have in there, and it is starting to otherwise fail. They're having, more calls as far as repairs for like the water and whatnot to get there. So that becomes, number two, and then the one we kind of fill it in to see what we have as far as budgeting would be the Madison Monroe. I think, while it needs to be addressed, it's that, one that I think is going to be the flex for the year to see where we are capital-wise on how much or whether or not it even gets done.
Thank you.
So then to unpin that comment, so I guess in terms of next steps, kind of initially, I guess what we thought of as an approach to take is obviously tonight, giving an overview. Scott gave an overview of the 2025 street reconstruction projects. Sometime, if it's late April, early May, obviously schedule permitting with all the folks here on the commission, myself, Scott, is when we would like to schedule a walk audit. So figure out, at the bare minimum, we would do the Michigan Ave. If we can squeeze it in, if we can allocate enough time in one day, then obviously we would also include the Washington Ave. But I guess I'll follow up with you all over the next few days to try to pin some dates and times that would work for us. But really the purpose would be having a walk audit, kind of a similar approach to what we've done in years past, addressing some of the comments that Scott mentioned earlier in terms of what he would want to see from this commission, what he would want the commission to look at during those walk audits. And then we would reconvene back here in this room afterwards to kind of do a overview discussion of.
Right, and Adam, even to add to that, because what I'd really like to do is like trying to get ahead of these things too, is if we could otherwise do that, I'd like to schedule my first PIM to kind of correspond in that time frame. So if there's even like members of the public that want to participate in that, maybe they don't have otherwise much time to show up here afterwards, but I'd really like to get that, even if, the members of this commission or whomever, in some short order after those can be scheduled, is to get those PMs to bring those things. So hopefully we can get them encouraged that and bring that there. So whether it's at a meeting here after walking or in another time to say, hey, this is fresh in our memory, this is what we saw, this is what we feel are some concerns, and get that involved.
I like the PM before.
You like the PM before?
Week before. And then the members of the committee, as we're doing our walk audit, could know what the concerns of the public were, and we'd be much more educated. And I think that the idea of the walk audits for our mission is to establish the purpose and need, not to do the design.
Right. Yeah.
And once we say, well, these are the things, the problems I want you to solve, then we'll let you go there, and then we can look at it and we can have our editorial comments, and you may give us choices. But our real charge is to help you with the purpose and need.
See, and here we talk about perspective and how it otherwise goes. And I can totally agree with you on that, Mr. Mayor. It's just really that how it is. From my perspective, I just want the feedback and comments.
Yes.
But, I'm not thinking of it specifically in your case. So we can work on scheduling that
Yes.
in that order. I
That
don't
would
have a
work
problem with
great.
that. I can see
Thank
that
you.
being very beneficial for this commission to do that. See? Always listen to the people around you. Don't blow them off. Yeah. Keep your ears open.
So we're thinking the walk audit is going to be on Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the area of importance per Scott's perspective, then I think that would be beneficial for us.
And I think
to
there's a lot of
prioritize
potential
that.
there. I mean, there's so much pavement underneath there, and it doesn't, since we did the twiddle and stuff like that, it's like, if you're coming underneath the bridge, where are you turning? Do you need it? I mean, like that. And if you're walking on the sidewalk, you got a bicycle in there, it says, but you're still getting splashed with water as you go in there.
Right.
I'd really like to know what the public otherwise thinks it should look like. I think that we got a lot of opportunity. And so, yes, definitely would like to get on that one, because the sooner we can do that, because that's going to be a challenge. I know there's also a lot of rail coordination that needs to go with that one. So it's going to be a lot of effort from, so the sooner we can get concepts and stuff and start coordinating with the rail, the better on that one. A lot of things outside our control.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thanks.
Hey, and everybody's still awake, so that's good. And that's,
The next one
thank
is
you.
the next deal on our agenda is an update on implementing the Safe Routes to School plan.
All right, so I know we touched on this a little bit last time that we met, just to kind of give an overview. So again, what is our Safe Routes to School plan? Countywide planning document focusing on a variety of different topic areas, topic areas related to health, safety, land use patterns, environmental considerations, etc. Really honing in on the 5 E's that folks within the transportation planning industry know very well. Those 5 E's being engineering, education, encouragement, evaluation, and planning. And then that 5th E, enforcement. Some organizations have swapped that for more of like a equity and diversity component. Some continue to use the enforcement criteria. So what this plan is, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a behemoth of a document, but it's focusing on every school within the county, providing specific recommendations within those 5 E's that we as a community should prioritize. So screenshot that I have in here is for Madison Elementary. You have an aerial infographic showing specific improvements, again, more from an engineering perspective, but then they also have those other E's as well from an education, from an encouragement perspective. What are some components that should be prioritized? And then really the meat of the document, from my perspective, would be the implementation matrix. So highlighting really who should be prioritizing the implementation of a specific deliverable, and then what would be the timeline? Is it a short term? Is it an immediate concern? Is it a long range goal, etc.? So as we talked about in December, this was really the purpose of why we're looking to do a fresh look at this planning document, is that it's about 10 years old now, and naturally from a city employee from planning side, Scott from an engineering side, there's always a lot of fires that pop up that, there's always a question internally of, are we using this plan to the best of our ability? Are we leveraging this plan as best as we could? So based on those internal conversations and the conversation that we had as a commission last time, we essentially convened a smaller group. This would be Scott and I, our city engineer, and then Mike and Nana, our chair and vice chair, to really do a deep dive of each of these schools referenced within the plan, and identifying, of all the recommendations outlined, what are still outstanding, what's in progress, what has been completed, or if there's projects that are already completed, are there some that say did a complete 180 that they've just stopped doing? So that's obviously still a work in progress. We're actually going to be meeting, I think, tomorrow to go over some initial findings, but I don't know if Mike, Nana, since you were involved more in the kind of the deep dive research, if you had any comments initially that you wanted to share, or initial observations or whatnot.
I thought that when I looked at the schools I had, which included Madison, for the most part, the physical stuff was pretty accurate. And I think it's the education encouragement part, which we're going to have to be cooperative with the schools on, are the areas where we could really get some bang for our buck. And I think that, I'll give you an example. One of the things is how are we going to reduce congestion around the schools? And you were talking about you could have, staggered start times and stuff. But there are other things we could do too. And I think that we sometimes have to think about things that were being done differently than have been done in the past.
I guess my comment is maybe working with the school board or with the principals again, since this document is so old. None of the principals are the same principals, at least any of the schools that I have. And they don't know what I'm talking about at all. Even if they're still doing these programs, I don't think they know why they're doing these programs in school. For Jefferson, I had a little bit of a benefit, not just because my kid goes there, but because Molly was a teacher there before she was a principal. So she does remember this happening and what was implemented and what stopped and what's still happening. So there's a little bit help there.
Yeah, and honestly, I'd say my initial observations are pretty similar. Just, some of the comments of, well, I didn't know that existed, yeah. Or what is that all about? Which, that really speaks true to the education component, that there's a lot more that can be done there. Obviously, this commission plays a small part, but we're not the sole party involved in achieving that. So what are some ways that we can work collaboratively with all the stakeholders involved to try to achieve some more of these recommendations included in the plan? So as I mentioned, this is more of an update that I wanted to talk about, that this is still a work in progress. We've been working on this over the last few weeks and months now. So I'd anticipate as we go through the year and we get some more concrete steps and actions taken, that will keep you on the commission apprised. So, Trevor, your hand's up.
Yes, just wanted to update you. Sounds like, Michael, you're involved with the Madison Elementary School. My kiddos go there, so as you might have guessed, I'm heavily involved. So I'm coordinating the second annual Kids Bike Rodeo that's coming up April 29th. So if you have any kids in Madison Elementary, I imagine we wouldn't turn down kids from another school. That would be mean. So feel free to bring your kids. April 29th.
Yeah.
It's right after school, sorry, 3:45.
Yeah, we'll just have you walk up to the podium, and if you could give your name and address then. Very official process.
My name is Jackie Shimke, and I live at 440 West Trillium Court, so on the west side of town. Just wondering if Point of Discovery School is on that list, because I think it opened after that list was originally.
Yeah, they are not on the list.
Will they be put on the list?
Could be.
We could. Honestly, we haven't talked about that next step as to, I guess, an amendment to the plan, but I guess there'd have to be some internal conversations, but I don't see why not. It'd be a longer process, obviously, likewise engaging the principal at the school, some of the faculty, obviously the school board. So never say never, but never say never.
I would think that we would have to, because why should they be the only one?
I don't know if this addresses student driving to and from school.
That's
reckless
part
driving?
of it.
Okay, because that is an issue at Point of Discovery School. It's a big problem in our neighborhood. So I would ask that you please put that on the list.
Yeah, we can definitely look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? 50.
Next is a discussion on long-range planning document for bus stop locations.
All right, so briefly touched on this last time that we met, but I wanted to talk a little bit more, just since kind of the brunt of this will be happening later this year, this summer, essentially. So just want to give an overview of, first off, what this is, what does this entail, what does this not entail. So first off, what does this not entail? It's not going to be a planning document focusing on where future bus stop locations would be. That's the purview of the Transportation Commission and ultimately the council. So that's their purview, that's their baby to decide where those future locations should be located. Likewise, planning for transit routes, again, that's their purview, not necessarily the purview of this commission for deciding transit routes. What it is, and this was in conversations with the transit superintendent, Talon, that I'm sure most of you know of him and have interacted with him in the past, but essentially what the goal of this planning document is supposed to be a guide for really the three commissions who would have a role in executing this plan. This would be the Transportation Commission, this commission, Age-Friendly Commission, and then obviously, I guess the fourth one would be Board of Public Works as well. So what is the intention of this plan? Just some of the topics that we flushed out. Really the core is to identify potential improvements that could and should occur at existing bus stop locations, taking into account some of the factors that may help or hinder such improvements from occurring. Big one would obviously be available right away with. There's a number of bus stops where there's just not ample acreage to do much of anything. But what are some of the improvements that could be had? You know, one, having shelters for folks who are waiting for a bus. Two, lighting to improve really the livability of those bus stops to improve the comfortability for folks who are looking to use public transit. Three, ADA compliance. Fourth, bicycle parking accommodations. Obviously, this would be more of a core for you folks as a commission. And then the last one being direct bicycle and pedestrian access to these locations. So kind of panning out in a smaller and a little bit wider view from a particular bus stop. How is the bike and ped transportation network to those bus stops? Is it existent? Is it not existent? What are areas where there's prone to be greater usage of pedestrian and bicycle travel to those bus stops? For areas where there's naturally going to be more of those, more traffic from those modes of transportation, obviously that should be a priority area to figure out what sort of improvements. An example that I'll give to address that, and we've talked about this internally as a commission, is, you know, one example would be the bus stops around Metro Market, right? Folks who want to ride public transit to go to Metro Market to pick up groceries. There's not a bus stop right in front of the building. There's not a bus stop really anywhere near. The closest ones would be along Texas and California, that intersection, and then another one closer to Highway 10. What are some ways that we could try to reduce that distance to make somebody who maybe using a walker and who wants to stop at Metro Market to pick up groceries, what are some ways that we can improve that, improve those accommodations for those bus stops? And then lastly, there's really a common point for any long-range planning document, and that being to produce a prioritization matrix for implementing said recommendations. So if there's a certain bus stop location that should take priority over another for a given type of improvement, of course that would be valuable information for you folks, Transportation Commission, ultimately the Common Council as well, to determine what should be done first. So I wanted to give that update because, you know, that's going to be something that's going to be coming down the pipeline later this summer. We'll actually be having a intern for the department who, that's going to be one of their tasks, is to, an intern this summer whose one of their tasks would be to work on producing this planning document, obviously working with myself, Scott, Talon, and the respective commissions. So wanted to keep you apprised of that. Hopefully sometime later this year we can have a rough document before you for consideration. So if there's any questions, happy to answer that.
I just have one question. Is there like data on bus stops, like which ones would just from like people scanning their cards or something when they get in, which bus stops are used the most, or is it just something the drivers know?
No, there's data.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say we do have a resident expert.
Talon has that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which obviously that's going to be a key, if not the factor, in determining what should take priority, right? So, any other questions or comments?
The next item is staff update.
If you needed to talk up, you can.
If you're done by 10 after, I could still make it.
All right. So 2 staff updates, just wanted to quick keep you apprised of. So first, safe roads to school, safe streets and roads for all, excuse me. This is kind of addressing your question earlier, Lawrence. So some next steps that will be undertaken with that grant. To have the interview phase scheduled for the grant. This would be this upcoming Tuesday. As folks may have saw, the RFP has already been sent out and has since been closed. The expectation is for letters of intent to be sent out later this month. The expectation being, and then along with county board consideration either in May or June, depending on the timeline that works. What I wanted to spend just a little bit more time on is to touch on the role of this commission throughout the execution of this grant. So really looking at the next 2.5 years, what is going to be the role of this commission? So as I mentioned before, the deliverables through this grant would be the creation of the action plan and the update to the bike ped plan. Naturally, for the update to the bike ped plan, you're going to be a primary party involved between you folks and the Board of Public Works as well, from a design consideration as well. So naturally, there's a little bit of ambiguity since we don't have a firm completely lined up yet as to what are going to be specific, say, opportunities for involvement with the folks who's going to be working in the creation of those plans. But what I wanted to talk about is some immediate actions. What are some things that, from a staff perspective, I think is going to be really important for whatever firm is selected to have, and that being really what are priority areas that the selected firm should be aware of, should know, should review during the discovery phase of this project. So for the first couple months, what are specific areas that this outside group should take a look at? And that, frankly, is going to be my homework for you all as a commission, is to, take a gander. This could be through personal experiences. Take a look and see, are there certain intersections, streets, corridors that should have a ripe look for whatever variable involved. If it's higher probability of crashes, if it's speeding issues, you name it. Some of the examples that I'll give that of areas that's been at least conveyed to me through folks over the last few weeks, months, etc. I mean, West River Drive is one of them. We have some folks here in the audience. That is a corridor that's not referenced in the current bike ped plan in terms of any sort of analysis, recommendations, etc. If there is a concern from residents, from folks from this commission as to this being an area that at least should have a hard look at, obviously that is something that whoever the selected firm is, that they should be aware of. Second one being, and Scott, you've been fielded this inquiry several times, I know, as well, as intersection of Stanley and Minnesota in terms of pedestrian accommodations, what can be done. So again, this is really more of a homework for you all, is to kind of think anecdotally. If you're driving around over the next few weeks, think about what are some intersections, what are some corridors that you think should be looked at. just so I think that would be some helpful information to send over to this firm for at least consideration. And then the next thing, segueing to the next update, just bike-friendly community application. I'll get to your comment, or your question soon, Trevor. Bike-friendly community application, so deadline is due June 25th. So I just wanted to touch on, honestly, more so just the different topics. As you can see, it focuses on the 5 E's that I referenced earlier, but just the breadth of what is all asked of is frankly pretty significant. And I think not only would submitting this application really be a check mark and a check in the box in terms of submitting it and hopefully getting re-upping our silver status, but really that'll be a good indicator to see where do we stand as a community on all these different metrics and how do we compare to comparable cities across the country, other communities here in the state as well. So just want to keep you apprised. There's going to be a lot of research, data needs that's going to be happening over the next few weeks, and I'll keep you posted. If there's any questions, I'll ask for the commission first. If not, then Trevor. Trevor, all you.
Oh, thanks, Adam. I'm just going to put in regarding the safe streets and roads for all, put in a second plug for West River Drive. That's not, being as a co-author of the grant, I'm familiar with the data. That because that death was, that traffic fatality was so recent, it's not part of our data set for the grant. So I think once the consultant and the Bike Ped Commission starts reviewing the data, I think the more recent data is super important to include. So this is just kind of a second plug for that corridor. We do have a recommendation from the Bike Ped plan, but it's just assigned a bike route, which is basically nothing in terms of changing driver behavior. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about the bicycle-friendly community app at all?
I already did.
Okay.
We have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Jackie Shimke, 440 West Trillium Court. Also like to put in a plug for West River Drive to be looked at, please, with our neighbor recently being killed on there. And we've had a lot of years of speeding and reckless driving in that neighborhood, especially on West River Drive. So we're asking that please take a look at that or consider that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. There being no further business, we stand adjourned.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.